Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome whenever you get to watch tonight's show. I'm Big Joe Shep, and this is Drie Bokke, a Ball BOD. I'll get told off if I mispronounce that again, but we're practicing Afrikaans as we speak. I'm here tonight on Drie Bokke, a Ball BOD, with my very, very good friend from Scrum5Rugby.com, Andy Daniel. Andrew, how are you, sir? You well?
Yeah, I'm okay. Surviving lockdown, but we'll be all right. We'll get through this together.
Good stuff. This is our second episode of Drie Bokke, a Ball BOD, and you're welcome to the show tonight. So please stick your questions up for our two guests. We're going to be covering a whole different pile of stuff this evening. We are brought to you as this evening from with our good friends at Kelpify, the creative digital design, who are putting together some intros for us, which will be sort of released in the next sort of week or so, and also by our good friends at the Asia Security and Protection Group, based in Hong Kong, but covering the whole of Asia and the Pacific, and covering all aspects of executive protection, equipment, personal executive protection and movement, and then currently involved in getting people from A to B safely, if and where possible, and currently today actually moving 28 people in the Pacific region. So if you need anything to do with looking after your kit, your people, your possessions, holiday homes, boats, whatever, then go to our good friends at Asia Security and Protection Group. Andrew, what's been happening in your world? What have you picked up on the news so far this week?
Well, it's been an interesting few days. Obviously, we've got the World Rugby Chairman election coming up, and that's starting to pick up pace with the campaign trail, and we'll cover that obviously later on. But I think one thing that came out today, which didn't surprise us all, but I think we can read between the lines, was Raelene Castle handing in her resignation for the Australian Rugby Chief Executive Officer. I don't think it's been a very pretty situation. 11 captains all clubbing together and writing a letter. Let's just say it wasn't just about her. It was about the leadership of Australian rugby, but I think it was the straw that possibly broke the camel's back, and they're looking for change there. Do feel for her because she has been up against it from day one, and then she had the Israel Folau situation last year. So, yeah, it's been tumultuous, I think is probably a word for it. A lot of turmoil in there. So yeah, she's handed in her resignation today, and that's probably the biggest story of the week, I would suggest.
Yeah, it is, and I think there's going to be more coming out in the next week or 10 days. Some may say, there's always a difference of opinion, isn't there? Some may say that she inherited, some things which she tried to change, and there was just a cacophony of other stuff. But yeah, more to follow on that. It is a difficult time all round, and we will be so covering a little bit of that later. Andrew, who have got on the show tonight? Introduce our first guest, mate.
Well, our first guest is a man who's steeped in Western Province rugby history. Schooled at Saxe in Cape Town, where he captained the first 15, as his son did a few years later. He then went on to play for Western Province with some SA legends such as Carl and Michael Duplessis, Christian Stewart, Kurt Small and Keith Andrews, to name just a few. In '89, he was part of the Western Province Currie Cup final team that drew the final with Northern Transvaal and shared the trophy. He's then coached both Western Province and Villagers Rugby Club. For those who don't know, Villagers is a massive rugby club in Western Cape, to Super League titles in South Africa, and can also boast that our second guest was once his assistant coach. After retiring from being a coach, he became vice president of Villagers Rugby Club, and in 2018-2019 was the chairman. Was the president of the club. His greatest achievement, though, is probably his son, Jordan, a 2018 and 2019 Varsity Cup winner. Last year was his big year. He played a little bit in 2018, but 2019 was massive for Jordan. 125 points in the competition, second only ever to Dimitri Kachakilis, the ex-Harlequins and Western Province fly half. And he got offered a contract in Durban for the Sharks last year, so he's now up there. Hopefully we'll see him in a Currie Cup and later a Super Rugby shirt. But yes, Mr. Western Province Rugby himself, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Anton CHAIT.
And here we go. Anton, good evening and welcome. How are you?
I just want to look for the guy that you introduced.
You owe me a beer at Varsity Cup for that. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for that, Andy. Yeah, wonderful to be on the show.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Listen, there's two things there. One is I picked up a message which said, why am I wearing an Ireland shirt on Drie Bokke, a Ball BOD? Because it's homage to the green and a little bit of gold I've got there. So if you want to send me a Springbok shirt, double XL, not one of those test ones, because you don't want to see me in a bit of lycra type top, lads. But in the meantime, that's what it is. I'm Irish. I'm from Dublin, and until we get a second host on with Andy Daniel, this is why you haven't got Big Joe Shep on, and it's the nearest I can get to green and gold. The other point is we agreed that we would do one or two small lines on each player, and I get told off for doing far too much, so I cut right back this week, and then Andy goes into a plethora.
Well, Hang on. Let me just say that is about a quarter of what Anton sent me about his career. Okay, that's the abridged. That's the abridged version. We'd still be talking now, Joe.
Our next
dates, how many points, who he tackled, who he missed was a bigger list, but it's fine.
Our next guest who I'm going to bring in now, I didn't ask him, because when I started researching him, because I knew who he was clearly, but when I started researching it went on and on and on and on and on, and I thought, oh Jesus, we'll get through the show. So our second guest is a man who is he's the messages coming and glow. We'll get you in a minute, lads. Our second guest, we need to get him into the studio. He is a coaching legend, a South African who has coached everybody from the Worcester Warriors, Quebec Steelers, the Sharks, Bath, Newcastle Falcons, South African assistant coach. And I'm not going to cover the rest of the things. He's done from London to Japan and he's now the head coach of the USA, national head coach of the USA Eagles in America, clearly. He is a legend that has done everything at every level of coaching and impacted, added value at all those levels. I was just genuine. It's sometimes really, really great to meet people that you have seen and that you have followed. And this man has done it all and affected lives in such a positive way. Please welcome the current USA Eagles head coach, Gary Gold.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's good to be here.
Cool. Right, Andy, you're going to start us all off. If I can stop all of these, we've got messages as well coming in. Ian Gilbert, who is out there in Madrid, or Ambassador Extraordinary on Madrid. Hola to you. Darren Everett is in Ireland, I know. Quinton Venter is Andy, mate, there we go. Jacques Henning, hello boys, makes us proud. Good man yourself, well done. Alex Bassin, who is the visually impaired and operations manager of the Change Foundation in London, really global lead on visually impaired rugby. You're welcome to the show. And who else have we got? We have got Dermot O'Rourke is in Ireland as well. Jesus, they're coming in thick and fast here now. There we go. Andy, across to you. Start us off the show. What have we got on tonight with the lads?
Well, we're going to talk about World Rugby, but I think it's worth starting off and talking about Anton and Gary's own relationship together. Anton's been telling me that I need to ask Gary about his playing career, because apparently that's supposed to be very interesting. I'm not going to. I'm actually going to let Anton start as well. And he can tell us how these two fine gentlemen know each other and what their relationship's like to this day.
Yeah, we met a while ago, Andy. Gary was in the Defence Force with my brother, and we became friends then. And then we sort of played rugby against one another, and we'll get to that just now. And then in about, I think it was 1999, Gary approached me with a video of the Queensland Reds line-out. And I was absolutely blown away. And I don't know if you recall, in those days, there was a lot of movement in the line-out. The Australians had started that. And he brought this to me, and I thought, flip this. I was blown away by that. And next thing, we were coaching together, and we won the league in 2000 together. And in 2001, Gary left for London Irish. But we've been very close friends. I speak to Gary literally before every one of his games. And as Joe mentioned, he's been to one or two clubs and international jobs in his life. But coming back to his playing career, much like his coaching career, Gary's played for a number of clubs. So Gary, maybe you want to just, I know it might take a while, but as a budding hooker, you played for a number of clubs. Maybe you can tell everybody who you played for.
Maybe we'll let Joe and Andrew ask the questions here, Anton.
This is the only one. I gave him carte blanche for one question and one question only. And you've got to answer it, Gary. You've got to answer it.
Okay.
My playing career is even less impressive than my coaching career, guys. So you don't want to talk about that.
Okay, Andy, I'll get this right from memory. So I think Gary went to the army and he was based in Youngsfield in the Western Cape. So he played for Defence. Then after Defence, I think he joined False Bay. Then after False Bay, I think he joined Hamilton's. And after Hamilton's, he ended his playing career at Villages, I think in the 13. So for the Western Cape to play for 4 clubs is quite a lot. Anyway.
So he's a good coach, Steve. Just sit on the side so much and watch. That's why he's been able to pick up the game. But
I'm not sure whether it was a commitment thing or a loyalty thing, but he played for 1 or 2 clubs.
Brilliant. Right, well, let's get on to some serious subjects. Gary, how are you first and foremost? Obviously, it's been a lot of turmoil in your work at the moment. Let's just say that. What's the state of USA Rugby? What can you tell us at the moment? Are you still in a job? Have you still got to wait a couple of weeks? I know Brett Gosper's pledged some money and is potentially pledging more. But from what you can tell us, what's the situation with you personally at the moment and with US Rugby?
So from a personal point of view, thank goodness I'm still in a job. They've retained the 4 coaches of the 4 respective teams, which is men's and women's 15s and men's and women's 7s. So we've been retained with a very small skeleton staff at the office, which are really just going through the process of what they call filing for Chapter 11, which is a business rescue, for use of a better terminology. It's not quite a full bankruptcy. We're not going to close the doors. The teams are still going to operate. And as you've mentioned now as well, there is support from World Rugby and on the 7th side from the US OPC, which is the Olympic Committee. So we just have to, see what happens in the next couple of months from the business rescue point of view. There's not much I can say about it. I'm not privy to that kind of information behind the scenes. But, thank goodness at this moment in time, I still do have a job. I mean, I think that's very much going to be dependent on what happens with the fixtures this year, if they do continue to play. As I think many of us in the professional coaching world are in the same position. I think, I think if no fixtures were to take place at an international level, I'll probably be one of quite a few people who probably will find themselves, not with much to do if there's no games that are going to be played. But we're quite hard at work at the moment now. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done with the core group of players that we've got. The Major League Rugby competition obviously has also just been called off, but we've got a lot of data from that competition that we keep following the players and actually getting some downtime now to put some really comprehensive programs together for the players where we can do what we call individual development programs for them. So we'll compile video footage of them and of them playing and attach that to statistical information of what they're doing really well and what areas that they need to improve. And so it's a real good opportunity to upskill players at the moment now, and hopefully we're going to take that with both hands and use that as a huge opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. And just to put some scope on it, I mean, people probably, I suppose from the sporting world perspective, are probably quite surprised that the USA is struggling for money, being the country that it is. But I actually watched not that long ago a great interview with your colleague Mike Friday, and he was talking about anywhere in the world, Perry Baker and Carly Niles can't walk down the street without being grabbed at a sevens tournament, but in America they can walk anywhere. And actually, if they didn't have their little bits of sponsorship, they would like the money's just not there. Is that to do with Olympics? Is that where the focus is? And if the sevens team all of a sudden win an Olympic gold, are we going to see a growth in funding?
Oh, there's no question of a doubt. If they were to medal, that you'd see a huge spike in the funding. I mean, the funding is quite generous as it is at the moment from an Olympic point of view. I mean, compared to where it was before it was an Olympic sport, I mean, sevens would be, and that's the reason why it wasn't very successful on the field, is because it struggled off the field as we do. The minute the sevens became an Olympic sport, then all of a sudden, the funding was able to come from the United States Olympic Committee because Olympics is a big deal in America, as you guys know. So
Yeah.
yes, if they were to medal, and they, both men and women stand a good chance of being a team that can get a medal or get onto the podium, then that could possibly look to increase as well, which would be quite exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to ask you about one set of comments from Rugby United New York's owner, saying that this could be a good thing for USA Rugby. I know he's quite an outspoken gentleman anyway, and so apologies, I've lost his name off my sheet. Would you agree with that? Yeah, would you agree with that?
I'm not really sure what he's referring to. It depends on what area you're referring to. I mean, I think...
Is he talking about the MLR, or is he talking about US Rugby? Sorry to cut you off. Is he talking about MLR or US Rugby, do you feel?
I don't know. Possibly MLR, probably because he's saving some money at the moment by the fact that they're not playing. By the fact that they're not playing means, they're not traveling at the moment. They probably got quite a substantial saving on player insurance at the moment because they're not playing. So I'm sure from his point of view, he might think that it's probably not a bad situation to be in at the moment, that they, not spending so much money on the game, and that the game is still in a healthy position, certainly from an MLR point of view, it seems to be. So, but other than that, I'm not really sure what he means. I mean, I think there's pros and cons to the situation. I mean, obviously none of us would like to be in this situation, but it is quite a reflective time at the moment, and I know that a lot of people have gone away and they are reflecting on, how the game should be played and what things you can do to improve the game. And so probably some good will come out of the situation, although obviously, unfortunately, as you're seeing with USA Rugby at the moment in our situation, there'll be some tough times for some people as well.
Do you think, sorry, Gary, do you think that obviously with the Raptors, the Colorado Raptors folding, do you think more teams are likely to fold, or do you think that more investors will come back in and Colorado will be able to come back and the others will be able to survive?
I think the situation with Colorado, interestingly enough, again, I'm not privy to this information. It's not really my domain, and I wouldn't want to comment on behalf of anybody that it's not my business. But my understanding is that the Colorado decision was taken before COVID-19 already, and that was it. I'm sure it was a financially driven situation as well, but I think there was a disagreement of alignment between ownership group as well, and the one ownership group had a vision in terms of how they saw the team, the team being compromised, and I mean compromised in terms of how its composition was, I beg your pardon, of the amount of US qualified players versus non-US qualified players. And I think the vision that they had for Glendale, which is the area where they're based, was slightly different as well. So no, I don't. I'd like to say, Joe, that I really hope in the next couple of years I don't foresee a lot of MLR teams deciding not to participate in the competition. I can say, and I think I'm not talking out of turn here. I know for a fact there's a good couple of candidate cities that are out there at the moment who are bidding to host. I mean, I know Dallas is going ahead, LA is going ahead. I know there's a bid from a team in Chicago, and there's a team from I'll slip my mind at the moment. I'll remember where it is at the moment. But there are quite a few bids out there at the moment. For Team Miami was the other one, but there's another team that they're bidding. So there are enough takers and there's enough appetite for Major League Rugby to continue in the US. Cool,
brilliant. Ladies and gents, you are very welcome to the show. It is Drie Bokke. And so many people. I'd like to send me messaging off. So if anybody send me private messages telling me that my Afrikaans is dreadful, and a shout out to Heinrich Jens van Rensburg. I think he was really funny today on one of the forums. An Irishman trying to write, let alone speak Afrikaans. Everybody thinks exactly the same. I am undergoing lessons as we speak. And also, why am I wearing an island top when it's South African and Springbok rugby Roundup show? It's because it's my homage, green and a little bit of gold around here, to one of my favourite rugby nations, which is South Africa. So there you go. So you're welcome to the show. We've got lots and lots and lots of people on from all over the globe. Mark Flenix, well done, boys. Keep this up. Thanks very much. Danny Patrick Pigeon. Danny, I haven't even seen you on our normal show. Then you popped up in South Africa. Well done, mate. Excellent. Great to see. Alex Basson from Change Foundation. Welcome, Gary. Well done, lads. Gareth Rees. If anybody Gareth and Di Rees, if anybody didn't see the Six Nations, go onto YouTube and research Mam's purse, about the story of how their mother left them the purse to go to rugby. That's what it's a Mam's purse. The story of the two Wildcats.
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Just amazing. You got to go onto YouTube. Mam's purse. Very, very funny. Two guys. Andrew Patterson's on. Andrew, great to see Anton and Gary on the same show. Two legends from CT.
Cape Town.
Cape Town, South Africa. Here we go. Jason Smith. Jesus, Jason. Here we go. It's going to come all of it.
Yeah, no problems, Jason. Cool, we'll do it. It's all good. It's fine.
I don't want to put my glasses on to read all this. Jason Smith says, "Good evening, gents. Anton, you look like you've lost weight from your YMCA audition. Let's discuss this thing called the global season. Surely it is unrealistic. The income into the program is primarily from broadcasters, and they dictate the calendar. Why does Gus Pichot, the current vice chairman or deputy chairman of vice chairman of World Rugby, consider the broadcasters will A, reschedule their calendar, considering Wimbledon, Ashes, cricket, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, absolutely. B, pay the same current pre-COVID-19 amount of money and even more. Furthermore, why, stop. Whoever that is down there.
Why did you start?
Jason, yeah. Jason's on the show. Jason's in the house. He'll have his say. Furthermore, why would cash-strapped Six Nations unions? I wouldn't say the Six Nations are cash-strapped, Jason. I'm doing my research on that. No disrespect. They're one of the controlling problems. I'm sure the guys will speak about that just now. Unions share any of the incomes when they are laden with stadium development repayments. Let us not even talk about the paymasters of the salaries of the players. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, I get all that, guys. Where does the problem lie, Anton?
Joe, yeah, I don't want to sort of go into the detail of what Jason's asked there, but I just want to rather reflect on what we know and what's happening in the world of rugby. And at the moment, we saw Raylene Castle getting handing in a resignation today, and more locally over the last few years in Western Province Rugby, who've been on the brink of of being bankrupt. In fact, they were bankrupt and they got bailed out by Johan Rupert. And the then CEO was a good friend of ours. Gary knows him well, Rob Wagner, and that was his fault. Then a chap called Paul Zacks came in with great ideas. Maybe his ideas were a little bit unrealistic at the time, but his intentions were all good. And he resigned a couple of months ago, and it was his fault. Now Western Province are without a CEO. They've been run by a management committee. And let's hope that whoever the new person is who comes in, please God, he can make it work. And I think the same with Raylene Castle. Is it her fault 100%? I don't think so. And these 11 captains who've written the letter, let's hope that they can turn the Australian ship around, because the world needs a strong Australian team. Coming back to World Rugby and the two manifestos that have been presented. Bill Beaumont's is similar. Is simple. He really wants an independent assessment of growing the game. But Gus Pichot, his is a little bit more radical, without much detail. And Jason makes some very, very good points there. I mean, I don't know where the broadcasters are at the moment. Certainly, post COVID-19, there are going to be a lot of changes to World Rugby. But I did a bit of research today on the World Cup, because I think that's the tournament that everybody aspires to as a nation. And if you look at the minnows, without being disrespectful, in 1987 we saw scores of 146-17, where Japan lost to New Zealand. Japan played in the quarterfinals in 2019. Now that's got to tell us something. That Japan had done something right from 1987 or 1995 or whenever it was to 2019. The Ivory Coast played in the 1995 World Cup. We haven't heard a word from them since then. Portugal played in the 2003 or 2007 World Cup. We haven't heard about Portugal since then. So certain nations are doing things right, i.e. Japan, and certain nations And I think Namibia are on the right track, by the way, because if you look at their performances over the years, it's got progressively better and better and better. And they had Phil Davies, who was a great coach for them at this year's World Cup. And I thought they did admirably. So my point I'm trying to make is World Rugby have to give the support to the minnows and develop nations who are so-called tier 2 and tier 3 teams.
Yeah, and I think this is the difference in the two manifestos here, is that, and I think Bill Beaumont summed it up perfectly. Actually, he's like, do you want evolution or do you want revolution? And for me, I'm really sat on the fence at the moment, because I think Pichot's got some fantastic ideas. My issue is that he's had some radical ideas for the last few years. He's been very vocal about the issues in World Rugby, hasn't necessarily backed that up with action. Now, that may be him hitting stumbling blocks in World Rugby. And actually, I listened to an interview with him a couple of days ago, and he was very complimentary about Bill Beaumont and working with him. But what he was suggesting was that he constantly, like the rankings, he was very, very outspoken about the rankings. Nothing changed about the rankings. The World Tournament went round once. Nothing. There was no second comeback from that. There was no, we're going to give it another go. He just wasn't. He wasn't happy. So the public perception could well be that Pichot doesn't get stuff done. Now, maybe, like I said, because he's been hitting blocks as the vice chairman, and now he'll step up to the plate, so to speak, if he was to become chairman. But maybe a good question for Gary, because he sits in. I hate the whole tier 1, tier 2, or the tier 2 nation. If he can hear us. What would you prefer from your chairman? Would you prefer evolution, or do you want a revolution?
Yeah, I get that. Gary, I'm not sure if you guys have hearing problems. Whether you, Gary, can you hear us now? Can you unmute my mic? No, it's not muted, mate. No, Gary, can you hear us? We've lost sound with Gary just for a minute. Anton, we'll come back to you while I'm trying to deal with that. I think that it raises a very good point. Is it doesn't matter what the individual says in their manifesto or the point of what they're trying to do. It's a bit like you said the other day, it's a bit like the United Nations, isn't it? You've got people vying on all sides. Politics shouldn't be with sport, but it does. And how actually people are saying that Gus came up with the global league. We spoke about this offline. I'm a huge fan of the Darwinian promotion and relegation. I think that allows every country to aspire to. I also think that tier 1, not the existing one, but the tier 1 countries as we know them, should be supporting tier 2 and tier 3. Is that possible? Is that a good aspiration, or do you think that group nations like the four rugby championship teams or the Six Nation teams are going to have to make changes themselves to set the example?
Do you want me to answer that, Joe?
Please, would you? Yeah.
Yeah. Firstly, I agree 100% with your view on the whole aspirational value. I think if you look at the English Premier League soccer, sorry, I just did something out. The reason it works is because it's a simple formula. There's promotion, relegation. Everybody knows exactly where they stand, what they have to do, etc., to gain promotion or relegation. I think the same has to happen with rugby. And whether that's at Six Nations or at Super Rugby level or at Sanzar level, or both joining together as Augustine Pichot wants to do, that has to be implemented. I don't think there's any doubt about that, because you can only get better. I mean, Andy knows the Varsity Cup. If we can take that as an example on a smaller scale, there are 9 teams in a league. They play a single round with a semi-final and a final. And the bottom team over a 2-year period gets automatically relegated, and second from the bottom plays second from the top in the Varsity Shield, which is the next year. So there are 2 tiers of varsity competitions, Joe. Yeah. And it's very clear and it's very simple. And universities, thanks to the brainchild of Francois Pinot and his team, know exactly what they have to do to gain promotion or relegation. It's crystal clear. And it's made the tournament better, by the way. Universities like University of Western Cape that were struggling in the Varsity Shield for a long time are now in the Varsity Cup. So that whole aspirational thing is critical for me.
Yeah, it is. I'm just going to try and bring
Yeah,
Gary
no,
back in. Sorry, Andy, we're having some difficulties with.
No, that's right. I'll carry on chatting to Anton. Can you hear us?
Thanks, mate.
I can. Thanks,
Oh,
guys.
can you hear us?
Yay! Amazing. We were just talking, Gary, about I suppose the two differences between the two candidates for the chairpersonship, should I say? Sorry, is evolution from Bill Beaumont, revolution over Gus Pichot, and whether Gus Pichot can actually get anything pushed through, because he's come out quite a few times as vice president, been quite critical of a few things, but maybe hasn't got it pushed through. The rankings being one of them, the first Nations Cup or Nations tournament that he wanted. Where do you sit on the sort of evolution versus revolution? I suppose, like, I hate to use, I don't like this whole tier 1, tier 2, because we should all be playing each other all the time, but there's a clear need for some alignment here. Who's going to make that happen for us? Who's going to give us a better game all round? And who's going to put more bums on seats in stadiums? Because that's what we need.
Yeah, look, I mean, the bottom line is I'm not a fan of an election process anyway, because for that very reason, because guys campaign in one sphere, whether it's for presidency of a country or whether it's a chairmanship in this case, and then how often do you ever see whether they do deliver or not? I mean, I can't answer to the question in terms of why some of the ideas that Gus has brought forward haven't come to fruition, other than the fact that I think that, World Rugby are pretty set in their ways in terms of how things have been done. I just, as you guys know, I mentioned the other day, I mean, it's my personal opinion. It's not necessarily the opinion of USA Rugby. My personal opinion is, obviously I'm slightly biased because I'm working with a tier 2 country at the moment. And it's a chicken and egg scenario. We in a difficult position because we want to become a better rugby team. And in order to become a better rugby team, we need to play against better opposition. And the more we play against better opposition, the more of a money spin it's going to become. So if we can host the All Blacks or Australia or South Africa or England or Wales in a Soldier Field in Chicago, when the All Blacks came there in 2017, they sold out in 65,000 people. So we need those opportunities before we can become a better rugby team. We're not getting those opportunities, so we can't become a better rugby team. And it's almost feeling that you're not going to, until you become a better rugby team, you're not going to get those opportunities. So that's why I say you're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. I think what all Gus is trying to, my understanding is what I think we need to do going forward is have something around this Nations Cup where there is an opportunity for teams to play each other. Now, that doesn't take away from the Six Nations. It doesn't take away from the Rugby Championship. All it means is you're just going to align your seasons. So it can be done in a couple of different ways. I'm not necessarily suggesting one specific way. I'm definitely suggesting don't take away from something that's working. Six Nations, Rugby Championship, don't take away from things like that. But what I would say is that you need to be playing your domestic game. Everybody needs to be playing it together. So all the players can play domestic rugby. Then you need to be playing your regional rugby, which is Heineken Cups and your Super Rugbies, and everybody needs to be playing that together. And in an ideal world, everybody needs to be playing international rugby together. So then you eliminate a lot of the club versus country row, because if a player is not an international player and he's just a club player, then there's no fight with the country because there's no other club rugby going on at that particular time. Should you wish to have it like a next level, we used to have a Vodacom Cup competition in South Africa or a minor league competition for the development. That's not a problem at all. But it's not going to make the unions have to go out and spend millions and millions of dollars and rands or pounds having to contract those players. So I think once you get alignment, then everything works a lot better. Now, that could be Six Nations at the same time as the Rugby Championship at the beginning of the year. Then you can go into your club competitions and you can go into your regional competitions, your Super Rugby, and you can finish the year off with international rugby. The other thing is, as well, is you must take into consideration, we all talk about it, but very few people actually want to do anything about it, and that's player welfare. And the demands of the game at the moment now are really, we're under a lot of pressure now to ensure that the players are getting sufficient enough rest without them being compromised in doing so. And so the minute you have a global season, and by global season, I mean that everything's aligned. The minute all those competitions are aligned and everybody around the world is playing those competitions at the same time, you can also have exactly the same period of time where you have a rest window. So you're not having to feel that you're under pressure as a player after a Super Rugby competition to go up to Japan for 2 months to get a 2-month contract there because you want to top up your salary. because you don't necessarily want to leave South Africa, but you can't afford to be in South Africa, so you want to go top up your salary, and that's where it starts muddying the waters a lot, and it starts getting very, very grey. Or you're hosting 2 or 3 extra barbarian games at the end of the year by the very same people also moaning about player welfare and saying the players aren't getting enough rest, but they are prepared to host a couple more barbarians games because they're trying to make money. So once you just have a clear line in the sand, then everybody knows where they stand. And I think that's what's being touted from Gus's point of view in terms of the way forward. Obviously, from our point of view, I might have a different view if I was somewhere else, if I'm brutally honest. But from our point of view, we want an opportunity to become a better team. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we're playing stronger opposition more regularly.
100%. Yeah.
I think it goes back to what Anton was saying just a minute ago about promotion relegation. Sorry, while we were just sorting your technical issues, I think there's a few things that probably there's a lot of pressure. I think obviously that the RFU in England are under a bit of pressure. I think the Premiership should eventually move to the summer or those summer months. That will really help with that global calendar. The rugby will be amazing to watch. We might actually see the end of 4G pitches and actually get people playing some decent rugby. But promotion relegation surely is for you. Sorry, Anton, I'm nicking your material now. But for you, like promotion and relegation, if you had a bigger competition other than the World Cup every 4 years to try and get promoted into, like a Georgia, would love to do in Europe, because Italy are not holding up their end of the bargain as far as I'm concerned. Surely that would be a huge plus for like you, Samoa, Tonga, all those nations to try and get into potentially a rugby championship. I mean, you played the final. Okay, you lost to Japan in the final of the Pacific tournament, but if the winner of that game was to get a ticket into the rugby championship, surely that would do wonders for the world game.
It would do. There's no question of a doubt about it. And I mean, again, taking ourselves out of the equation, it's not really fair. I mean, it can be blamed that I'm biased if I say my own thing. Go back to the situation you were talking about. I was coaching in Europe at the time when there was a huge hue and cry over Georgia. And all Georgia was saying is, well, just let us play Italy. We're not saying we want an immediate into the Six Nations. All they were saying is, well, just give us an opportunity to play a promotion relegation game against them. And then let the best teams go head to head from that point of view. So, again, that is the way of the world. Whether we like it or we don't like it, that is the way of the world. Personally, I'm actually, when I coached in the UK, I'm not a huge fan of promotion relegation for other reasons, because of a sustainability of a club is very difficult. But unfortunately, I can't argue against that. The fact of the matter is, you're 100% right, Andrew. That's the nature of life and the nature of sport. And if you were in a situation like that, and there was an incentive that if we were beating Japan in that PNC, and it meant that for a year we could play in the Rugby Championship. Obviously, we're not good enough to play Rugby Championship at the moment, and I'm not for 1 second suggesting that. I'm just saying, if we were to be able to compete the way Japan competed for that period of time, and the way they have competed over the last 8 years, quite honestly, then you can improve and you can be able to get onto the stage with the big boys, just like Japan have showed us.
Yeah, definitely. I think I touched my head there before, because I think in the Northern Hemisphere, and Gary, this well, I never realised from Bath in England doesn't make him a bad person, just makes him a man from Bath in South Africa. It's the mindset change. I've seen people in the last 2 weeks, since again this has been touted about, well, it's a winter sport here, and making excuses that, but actually we prefer it in the summer when we've got festivals, when we've got sevens festivals and stuff like that. So it is doable. Somebody and all the rest have like the year splits up. So in the summer, in the Northern Hemisphere, especially in England, for example, you've got cricket and tennis and stuff like that. So they like their world. Well, actually, somebody has to take a control back. We do need money in the game. We can't get away from that. But there's too much control. The Heineken Cup, or the APCR European Cup now, playing a game where you've got an English team or an Irish team playing in France at 5:30 on a Sunday is only for one set of people, the broadcasters, not for the players, not for the fans, not for anybody. So it is doable. I think there's a couple of things that do need to do, and the global season, guys, you're right, and promotion relegation, I don't think you can get away from. But I echo,
less is more.
Less is more sometimes. But I echo your point, Gary, is that for teams in like the English Championship, so the second tier, it is difficult to sustain because there's a massive jump.
That's right.
And I'm sure that's the same in all countries. I'm sure that's the same with you. But I think if we take a step back and reset ourselves from a grassroots and building and developing the game, and we can't get away. This, 5 years now, it's just been constant. We need to do something to bring what were the old tier 2 and 3 forward and give them an aspiration, because otherwise it's just not.
There's a significant thing to take into consideration here, Joe, when you're comparing club versus country, though, that I think is not quite fair to compare, because it's not really comparing apples with apples. If you want to debate the promotion relegation situation, say in a championship club, for example, say Yorkshire, for example, Leeds, Carnegie, Leeds, Carnegie, where they've got a guy who's an investor and he's put his hard-earned money into it and he wants to see it survive, and they should. And I know this is very controversial. I know we're going to get a lot of people who are going to criticize me for this, but then unfortunately, 3 of their key guys get injured. They don't have a huge budget, so he's only really paying for 50% of the squad. Is he paying decent money for? The rest of them are still working, and it's a semi-amateur club. And their key player gets injured for 3 months. He does his knee, and they can't play, and they don't survive that year. Okay, I've seen that happen in Premiership clubs. We saw it happen in 2012 with Wasps. Wasps picked up literally their top 5 players got key injuries, and they were in a relegation battle before they even blinked. That's very different to a country, though, because remember, most tier 2 countries don't contract their players. So it's not as if they've got this financial burden hanging over their head where they've got tens of thousands of millions of dollars invested in a squad. We don't pay our players a contract fee. We pay them a per diem for their assemblies. So it's a slightly different scenario when you're actually committing to a sum of money upfront to contract players for a season-long situation. And then you should happen, like London Irish is a very good example. You have a couple of bad years and then you go all the way back down again. But, it's very difficult to sustain it and come back again. I don't think we should
London
I'm just saying it is different, whereas in international rugby, it doesn't really matter that much if you should get relegated 1 year from the Six Nations, because you'll always have a chance to come back the following year, because you're picking the best players when you're picking for your country in any case. It's not determined by who you're paying the best salaries to. Tier 1 countries is, but it's highly, highly unlikely that, with respect, the tier 1 countries are going to get relegated from any of those competitions. And I'm talking about the big boys, the Australians, the England, the Wales, the New Zealanders. They're not going to get relegated in a hurry from any of those competitions.
Great point. That's why a rugby generalist like me, who was a prop forward, listens to people like you, educated debate, so you can't argue with it. And I'm just going to bring a few people's comments in. Thanks, that guy. It is really good to put that analogy and that expertise in place. Gareth Adams says, great show. Thanks, mate. Arthur Protea. Well, we're back to this.
Protea.
Protea, there you go. Andy's Afrikaans pretty well.
There's not words I should be putting on here, my Afrikaans.
Yeah, no. An Irishman speaking Afrikaans is interesting, absolutely. Miles, good evening to you. I hope you're well. Catch up with you soon. Great as always. Who else have we got on here? Any points from what the stuff the guys have covered? Dan Stevenson says, just joined in. You're looking good, Andrew. Well done. There we go. She adds that Japan have a great coach and have put in money. And maybe Gary can add us on this one, whether it's World Rugby have put in an awful lot of that money, because Anton brought up a great point of where they were getting hooped by New Zealand on 47, 17 or 18 it was, and then make the quarterfinal. And actually, I think they just ran out a bit of a steam, actually, in the 2019 competition. Jacques Hennin says Namibia. I like to give them a shout-out because I picked them as my Tier 2 team during the World Cup and got to know a lot of them very, very well. Great lads. Mark Flemix says, sorry, guys, need to leave. Man yourself there. We wish you the best. Get that tag on, get it home, and you should be home anyway.
Don't worry about that for the next 20 minutes, buddy.
It's a lot of price. Says, hi, Andrew Daniel. What a shirt. Bass in London.
About the Bath one.
It says it is down to nations who have the resources and financial backing to help the smaller playing nations. And we'll come back to some more. Andrew Daniel, across to you, mate.
Yeah, Just my final thought on this before we talk about how COVID-19 and coronavirus we come back from this in South Africa, and Anton's going to give us how we're all going to make millions out of rugby in South Africa after this. I think my final point is that I think as World Rugby we need to stop trying to fit a round peg in a square hole and just coming up with random ideas and playing a game somewhere and expecting 60,000 people to turn up when it's not the right time to do it, and then 20,000 turn up, they don't make the money. I think the Sunwolves is a really good case in point at the moment. You know, as soon as Japanese rugby couldn't afford them anymore, because flying 50, 60 people around the globe to play in tournaments and squads and the backroom staff and everything like that. So my point is I want World Rugby and whoever takes over, I want us to potentially start looking after our own homes in the first instance and our own countries, and then look to build it. Flying a superstar team out of South Africa to Georgia to try and help Georgia isn't necessarily going to do much in the long run. It might help them initially. They might have a great game there and everything like that. You do it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, it loses its effect. So I think let's go for less is more, but also let's also look within our own countries and how we're going to build that revenue. And I'd love Anton to tell me now, like, he's obviously been involved with Western Province Rugby for years. He's been a president of a massive rugby club here in Cape Town. What's going on at the moment? What are the talks happening behind the scenes? How are we going to regenerate currency economically as rugby clubs in the Western Cape across South Africa? And then how are they going to do it at Super Rugby level? Because the crowds aren't there at the moment with Super Rugby as it is. So how are we going to bring people in? My point last week or 2 weeks ago was we make the Curry Cup the biggest Curry Cup we've ever made it. We give somebody commercial rights for very, very little, but they put in bucket loads to make it huge. We roll out all the Springbok stars. They're all going to be eager to play rugby and try and fill the stadiums first and foremost and show everybody what a competition it can be. So, Anton, locally, where are we at, and what are the plans at the moment to try and regenerate after this horrible virus?
Well, Andy, I think firstly the unions are very, very concerned. Spectatorship is down substantially. For a Sharks Stormers game to attract, I think it was 21 or 28,000 people on a Saturday afternoon in Durban is unheard of. You know, that historically should be a sellout of 45, 48,000 people. So numbers are down substantially. The Stormers, which probably has the biggest following of any of the Super Rugby teams, they down to 19, 20, 21,000 as well. 18,000 for a big game. So are our stadiums too big? And is the television, are we being spoiled by such good quality television, great commentary, etc., that people are just saying, you know, we'd rather sit on our couches and watch 3 Super Rugby games on a Saturday afternoon rather than getting in our cars and going to the stadium. The other thing is affordability. It's not that affordable for the masses anymore to go to a stadium to buy season tickets or to buy a match day ticket.
Yep.
So I think unions are looking at alternatives. They're looking at alternative stadia in terms of smaller 20, 25,000 seater stadiums. But just on that, Andy, and this is why this World Rugby Initiative for me is so important. I want you guys to visualize a Friday evening in March. Stormers are playing Toulouse at the Cape Town Stadium. We will fill that stadium. 55,000 people will go to that game. I have very little doubt. I think people are tired of the product. The Super Rugby product is tired. Nobody knows how it works with the various, what do they call those? The groups or whatever they're in. How the log works, franchise, conferences. That's it. Nobody knows who's winning this conference and who's second and who's going to make the quarters, etc., and the playoffs and how they work. So a simple competition is absolutely vital that the customer understands, the spectator understands.
And that's the and that's
on
the
your Curry Cup.
Go.
Sorry, Andy. On the Curry Cup, you spot on. The Springboks have to play in the Curry Cup. They have to play. Otherwise, you'll get no spectators. Last year, we had a single round Curry Cup, no Springboks. There must have been, 1,000 people at a game? 2,000 people? It was terrible. No sponsor is going to support a competition like that unless your top players are playing.
And this
double round.
Yeah, absolutely. And your point on Super Rugby sort of epitomises what I was attempting to get out just a minute ago, was that this is where it's so difficult, because Super Rugby wanted to involve Japan. They wanted to involve Argentina. They managed that, but did that cheapen the product? Because we were then, this is what I get to when it's a round peg and square hole. You've got the Kings and you've got the Cheetahs now playing in the Pro 14. Sorry, but Connacht versus the Kings on a Sunday afternoon is only good for Connacht and Kings fans. It's what I'm saying is Super Rugby's lost its shine. Did we cheapen the product by bringing in tier 2 clubs, essentially, from tier 2 nations? Therefore, we're trying to help them, but actually we've just taken out of our own pot because the product has been cheapened. And that is such a fine balance to find, because we want Argentina and Japan competing, yet commercially it was a terrible decision 2 or 3 years down the line. So Toulouse might come out to Newlands and fill out 55,000. Are they going to do the same in 2023, 2024 when people have seen it? Or have we got to reinvent the wheel again? It's so difficult.
Andy, can I answer that? I don't think by bringing in Japan and Argentina cheapened the product. It was the structure of the product, if that makes sense. So if we go to Super Rugby with the Sunwolves and with the Jaguares, if the structure of the competition was changed and it wasn't this conference system, and maybe it was pools of 4 or pools of 8, and it was a simple competition where the customer, the spectator, understood exactly what was going on, I think it would have been better received. It hasn't been well received. Super 18 was a disaster. There were just too many teams, and so it started going downhill.
I think another key point, and actually somebody on the group who made that point is Dan Van Sale, who knows a lot about what he's talking about. He's a top man, Dan, and his point is very well made. Andy, I don't think in 20 years you can say that the gloss of Heineken Rugby is gone. I don't think that anybody doesn't get excited about Heineken Rugby, and that doesn't matter if Treviso are playing. Because I think if Treviso are playing down at the Rec, it will be sold out. Because if Treviso are playing, they've done well enough to qualify to play for the Heineken Cup. And I think
but what's a sellout, Gary?
What talking about is it if your format means that the best teams are qualifying to play in that competition, and that's the reason why I know a number of comments have been made about other Springboks playing the Curry Cup. Well, that's a no-brainer. If it's a global season and everybody's playing their domestic game at the same time, so the Premiership is playing while the top 14 is playing, while the top league in Japan is playing, while the Curry Cup is being played, then your international stars have got no choice. If they want a provincial contract, they're going to play for their provinces at that time, because they won't have a conflict of interest in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's why there's a lot of merit in the point is that Heineken Cup, I think, is a very appealing competition still, because the format works very well, and because it's tough competition year in, year out to qualify to play for that competition.
And it's called the pull through from the Challenge Cup, which again is a pull through from the national leagues and the lower leagues. So that aspiration again is to come through. I mean, Leinster. I mean, we had a dreadful couple of years. Won't mention the chap's name anyway. We dissipated a little bit from our success. Dropped into the Amlin Challenge Cup, won it, bounced back. I tell you what, I think that did more for Leinster and for the fans and for rugby than actually us winning year on year on year on year on year. Like, we can bring in a couple of comments there, because it is great to see Dan Funsale. There you go. Look, my Afrikaans. Anybody who's watching the Afrikaans probably says I'm the only person in Ireland who says his name right. My good friend at Rugby Academy Ireland there, Dan Fonsale, the former Springbok scrum half, top man, doing a fab job with Rugby Academy Ireland. Heineken Cup is a great format, no need for a change. Springboks must play in the Currie Cup, totally agree. Daz Everett says a great show. Regan Craig disagrees and says nobody expected South Africa to win, so he disagrees. And he adds that the global season internationally makes no sense and devalues the Rugby World Cup. We are all entitled to our opinion, but I think that the global system, the global calendar has to come, and somebody has to give it, because it goes back to the winter and the summer and how you change that about. So, look, everybody's been chatting through a number of simple solutions here. And it keeps going back to the same thing. Clay Beechner in London, a Monster fan from Ireland. Catherine, good evening to you. Hope you're better. I'll have whatever Anton is drinking. He's talking a lot of sense. See, absolutely. That's why we bring these people in. Gary Gold and there we go. What else have we got? Diane Stevenson says Rugby Championship has become too predictable. Why? Because the All Blacks win it all the time. I'm not sure. Jason Smith adds in, the pro rugby is not sustainable in South Africa, New Zealand or Australia. Well, I'm just going through some of the other comments. We'll come back to that one for both Gary and Anton. Pro rugby is not sustainable in South Africa, New Zealand or Australia. But before we do, Dan Fonsale, don't play as the club level. Club is amateur. You should only play pro players who don't want to be pros. Great point. So we'll come back to that one. Gary Gold, is pro rugby not sustainable in South Africa? Australia, give us your thoughts.
No, it is sustainable. I don't agree with Jason on that one. I think the way it's packaged and the way it's presented is wrong, and has been wrong in the past. And I think we've all alluded to that already on this conversation. I think that if there was a competition that was brought in where you had your Super Rugby teams that were playing against Northern Hemisphere teams, for example, as a competition, then I think it could be very sustainable here. I think one of the things that's happened in South African rugby, for example, and I haven't been here for a while, but when I was coaching here for the Sharks, for example, I know that there's a huge emphasis on reducing the amount of pro players, and the simple reason for that is because the unions just couldn't afford to have over 100 contracted rugby players at the union, when really your showpiece team, your Super Rugby team, really, you can probably run a Super Rugby team on a squad of about 40, 45 with injuries if it's an 18-game season. So I know that they're reducing, and they have reduced it dramatically, and I think if they reduce it dramatically and they make the competition format better, as Anton alluded to earlier, then I think it can be sustainable. But I understand why Jason's saying it, because, if you look across Super Rugby, you see that there's nobody in the stands. But the television money is still there from a SANZAAR point of view. I just think that if you are going to look at re-looking at the game, and you're going to look at making it worthwhile for competitions across the globe, I personally think that there's a very, very strong pull from certainly the South African teams who want to be involved in Europe a little bit more often. And I do know that a few years ago, when they did re-look at the Heineken Cup, there was a very strong desire that the competition incorporated the South African teams at the time. And in fact, the competition was set out originally for that, which was going to be 6 French teams, 6 English teams, 6 Celtic teams on merit, and then the 6 South African teams. And that was going to be the format that was proposed at one stage for the format of the Heineken Cup when it was redone. But then the South African team decided to continue with their SANZAAR contract. So they re-signed the SANZAAR contract and carried on playing Super Rugby. So again, I do think formats need to be looked at, but and I understand why Jason says it's not sustainable, but I think it does need to be looked at, because what isn't sustainable is paying each union paying 120, 130 players when there's nobody in the stands watching the rugby.
Brilliant. Andy? We are up to an hour.
Yeah, so it's, we could go on for more, trust me. I suppose final question for you guys would be, we get out of lockdown, Also, in 4 years' time, Gary, you're going to be world chairman because everyone's just been saying on the side of the screen you should do it.
No chance.
Can you come back and sort out Bath? Look, I know they didn't treat you well, but you can come back. I apologise for them, but I liked you being there. It was great. But if you were to walk out tomorrow, what's the first thing you'd do to get us all back, get the stadiums full, and get going again? Because you must be chomping at the bit to get back on the training field as it is, and Anton, you must be chomping at the bit to come and sit in front of me at Varsity Cup.
Yeah, watch some schoolboy rugby.
Yeah, I think for me that's key to this. Is I just want people to come out and go back to basics to a degree, and go back to your local rugby club. Go and watch some schoolboy rugby. Especially Bruce Craig. Trust me, Bruce Craig can. His mate from Dyson can definitely afford him, Jason. Go and watch schoolboy rugby, because there's a dark side to schoolboy rugby which we don't need to go into now. But the rugby is fantastic to watch. Go and buy from a shop at your local rugby club. Go into the clubhouse afterwards and buy after the rugby club and start regenerating from the bottom. But guys, what would you do as soon as lockdown finishes to try and get the rugby appetite flowing again?
And
Gary?
Okay, what I would do if let's start with schoolboy rugby. I think it's going to be a hell of a challenge for us here. The kids have lost a fair bit of the season already. Craven Week's been cancelled. That's our national schoolboy competition. And I feel for those kids, especially the ones in matric, which is grade 12. They're not going to have the opportunity to, they've dreamt about this for their entire school career, to play for their school's first team, and they're missing out on a very important aspect of their life. So what I would do, for example, in the Western Cape, Andy, if we just look at the schoolboy league in inverted commas here, you've got your 4 southern suburb schools. There's no reason why they can't have a mini round robin tournament, where they play Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, and each of the 4 teams plays each other once, and they get those games, in a week. They actually play each other Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. I've spoken to a couple of headmasters, and they're very pro fitting in Wednesday games. On the Currie Cup side, they're going to have to play at a single venue, unfortunately, where the players are going to have to be kept away in isolation. And it will be maybe Potchefstroom, or it could be Bloemfontein, or it could be the Marbella Stadium in Nelspruit.
Get way out of the way.
And they'll probably play behind closed doors, and it'll be for TV, purely for TV. But they're going to have to come up with innovative ideas to kickstart the game again, and for spectators to watch something.
I think from an innovative point of view, I think what's going to have to happen is when the crowds are allowed back in, I think there's going to have to be a stay of execution. And I know this is not going to be very popular from the administrators, but I think for a significant period of time, I think you might need to allow spectators to go in and watch games for free. And I think that should be randomly across the board. I think, for the amount of heat that people are taking at the moment, on their earnings that have taken a hit, there's definitely an appetite for rugby. There'll be an appetite to go back and watch rugby. There'll be an appetite to get, once everybody's safe, I'm assuming now everything's safe and the virus is gone. But I think once we start going back to stadiums, I think, for a significant period of time, the unions need to maybe think about the opportunity cost of rather having people in the stadium and filling the stadium, and supporting the merchandise and buying the food and buying the beer and buying merchandise on the day and trying to support them from that point of view. But, to get bums back on seats and get people, to want to go back and rugby for a significant period of time, I think it's probably worldwide. You should just allow people to go and watch games. And Test rugby, I appreciate, is slightly different. You can't allow that to happen, otherwise you'll have a rampage at the stadium. But I do think, I think Currie Cup and I think Super Rugby, you should allow friends, families, make it a day out and let people go and enjoy themselves and watch rugby for a while, and almost give back to the suffering that people have lost jobs and stuff like that. Ultimately, it is a sport, and very it is a significant amount of income that the gate does give to certain organizations, certain clubs, but in certain competitions, the television money and the sponsorship money is more significant than the gate money. And at the moment, in any case, in the Southern Hemisphere, you're getting such poor crowds as it is. You'd rather be playing in front of full stadiums where people actually appreciate the fact that you're giving back to the supporters and allowing them to come in for free.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. And hopefully, gents, I'll see you at Varsity Cup at some point.
Next year.
Yeah, I think it's Anton's round as well. Just saying.
Yeah.
Ladies and gents, we are 5 minutes over our allotted time. It's great. We could have been going for 3 hours for this. It's not bad for a tester show 13 days ago where we said we do one a month and just see what the sort of reaction was like. It's been absolutely phenomenal. This is the Drie Bokke, a Ball BOD. And you've been joined tonight by my very, very good friend, Scrum 5 Rugby's Andy Daniel, and two legends in South Africa and of the game in Anton and Gary. Lads, it's just the sense you talk tonight. I think we could have gone up hours, and there'll be people messaging us, Andy, I think, for weeks to come now, getting them back on again. So listen, thanks for your time. We wish you all both very, very best in the future. We hope this passes off quickly and we all get back to some great rugby. There are solutions. Don't you agree, Andy? There are some simple solutions there.
There are loads, and I just want to put the open invite out that they're more than welcome to come back on at any time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us, guys. Appreciate it.
It's been so good, so good.
Okay,
Joe?
Yes, mate.
If I may, a good friend of ours, we have a group called BBC, which is Boys Breakfast Club. We meet every Friday morning at 7:30, and one of our good mates, a chap called Ken Moby from Liverpool originally. His 90-year-old mum passed away yesterday, so I just want to say, Mobes, we're thinking of you.
Mobes, we raise it to you.
Cheers, Mobes.
And the other thing, Joe, is it's quite fun for Gary and I to see quite a few guys we coached and we know watching the show and commenting. It's it's great. Thank you for having us.
And let me just one last point, Anton. It's been absolutely fantastic to conduct an interview without your wife gate crashing it, which has been fantastic.
In fairness, I've missed that. Quite quiet. Normally, if we've got one of our from Zakaya Zvitanovic, who's an All Black fan, who runs a fantastic 3D Rugby International Forum, and normally her cats, one of which is called Macaw, constantly comes in from the side, like it's named after. So we've missed that. We've got people who have normally got the wicket in the background.
We can post the video if anybody wants it.
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about.
It's
If you look at Jordan's face when I say your dad will retweet this later, you'll know exactly when I broke his heart.
Lads, we need to wrap up. Thank you very much to Gary.
Thanks, guys.
And it is, if it's when, you'll be back on. To everybody who's just watched tonight, thanks very much for joining us on Drie Bokke. I'm Big Joe Shep, and my very, very good friend who's leading all this is Andy Daniel from Scrum 5 Rugby. Thank you for joining us. Go back to the beginning if you didn't watch it. Some awesome thoughts from the knowledgeable heads of Gary and Anton. On looking ahead now, I'm not sure what's going to happen with this show, considering it was a test 2 weeks ago, as I said, and it was meant to be a monthly, and we'd see how it goes. It's going to be weekly.
I told you didn't listen.
we will be, I think, back in 2 weeks' time. Keep watching on Three Blokes, a Ball BOD, and we'll let you know. Watch on Scrum 5 Rugby, and we'll let you know when the next one's going to be. It's likely to be 2 weeks' time. On next Monday's main show, I say main show, they're almost equal now. Three Blokes, a Ball BOD. You can see where we nicked the name from. Next Monday, we are working with the fantastic International Virtual Rugby Club set up for COVID-19, and we do hope that we're having some ex All Black players on and some other players on. We're waiting to confirm all that. And then next week on the main Three Blokes, a Ball BOD, we've got the first of 2 weeks looking at the British and Irish Lions. This will interest all you Springbok and South African fans. First of 2 weeks looking at two different forums. We're joining forces to do joint ventures. Week one, next Wednesday, we are looking at the relevancy of the British and Irish Lions tours icons and memorable tours. And then the following week, we'll be looking at a match day 23, oblique a squad 41. So that's going to be really interesting with some surprise guests on there as well. So that will be really, really, really good to see. Until then, from Gary and from Anton, from myself, Big Joe Shep, and his bigness, Andy Daniel. Thanks very much, lads.
Thanks, guys.
Wherever you are.
Guys.
We will see you soon. Guests, if you just stay in the studio.
Okay.
Thanks very
Anton
much.
did. Gary can wait to get rid.
He's maxed out. He's gone for a drink. We'll see you all soon. Take care. Stay safe.
Yeah.